Okay. I always say this because I'm not that smart of a human, and then I repeat it, it's kind of my shtick. But I think we're actually live now on my channel. And so I've got this one, and it's going to be a fun episode. It's Beard Banter episode 50. I'm here with Alyssa Miller. She's somebody I've looked up to for like a long time. I mean, like just as in from her stage presence and things that I kind of encountered over time, and I've used them in my own speeches. So this is fun. But we might battle it out a little bit here today. And it's because of exactly the content we're going to get into. So let me set the stage for y'all before I introduce Alyssa and before she like pops me right off my pedestal here. But let's get into it real quick. Alyssa, it's great to have you here. Let's do it. Okay, here's what started this, y'all. Alyssa posted this a month ago now, and she said, if your answer to someone, and I'll do it in her voice, she's sitting there, I can imagine she's fired up about this post, and I'm just getting the presence like, you know what? If your answer is who asked you for advice in getting into the cybersecurity profession is they should get certifications or build a home lab, you're helping no one. No one. Honestly, that's lazy advice that serves no actual value in helping them launch their career. It hurts our industry, but yet worse yet, it's our cybersecurity community. If that's your response, then please consider instead just saying like maybe you don't have an answer, or like maybe recommend them talk to people who actually have something to offer. And maybe in her heart before she typed it, she said, and maybe shut the hell up if you're saying these things. Maybe that wasn't actually there, but that's how I see it. So what was in your head, Alyssa? And did I capture the moment well enough? I tried very hard.
I was not that angry.
Okay. I had hands. I was like hands.
I love the rage. Oh my gosh. No, it's and yes, it does come off strong, right? So I get why it reads like it's ragey, but no, it's frustrating because I will hear stories from people who are trying to get into cybersecurity, right? And they'll come ask me questions about the same thing, right? And they'll tell me that someone told them that, and it's like, and that's all they gave them, right? Like,
sure.
and
go build a lab, go get some certs.
Yeah, go
have
build
a nice
lab and
day.
get some certs. I'm like, okay, so how does that help you get a job?
Sure.
Right? Maybe you can put like a home lab. You obviously can put certs on your resume, and it does get you past.
Yeah, and a lot of the comments were that, right? Like, hey, but I have certs and I have to get past the resume filters.
There is
and,
that
your
checkbox you got to have a lot of times with some of these jobs, but it's like it doesn't really. It's like to me, it's just an easy offhand answer I can give somebody, right? Like I can just say, oh, do this and do this, and don't leave me alone now, right? Like, and it's like, I know what really bothers me about it. What actually inspired that was I was talking to somebody who had spent literally thousands of dollars between getting certs and building a home lab that they were doing all sorts of stuff
Which don't even make me unpack that part of this yet, because there's like, that's a whole nother delve. We might just like put a pin in.
Might touch
continue.
But so that's why I was responding like that, because somebody had told them that those were the things you had to do. And it's been a story that people have or advice that people have given for a long, long time, but it doesn't really get them. It doesn't address what's keeping people from getting jobs. What's keeping people from getting jobs is not the fact that they don't have certs. It's not the fact that they haven't learned on their own in a lab. Yes, those things do help you develop, right? I mean, certainly home lab, you gain experience. But the problem we have is in the hiring process in cybersecurity. And if you can't educate people on how to overcome the challenges there, how to craft a resume that's tailored to a job description, how to understand the automatic applicant tracking systems, those types of things, even just how to find what it is in cybersecurity that lights their fire.
Let's dig into those three things, because you've covered three things that are big there. I want to go back first, though, and kind of get your answer to this, because your point, the three things you hit really are, yes, you have to understand what lights your fire, like what makes you passionate about something, right? Like to that point. I think to your point, you have to have the certs to get through, but you also have to understand the job filters. That's another piece you made, right? And then how to get through that process. How do you actually get hired? How do you go towards gainful employment? So why this brought me up, and I'm going to bring this up, is my response to your post that day. And I was in a car. I think I was driving back from like Denver or something. I wasn't driving. Just for anybody that's going to like jump on my case in this conversation, like I totally wasn't driving myself.
Voice to
But
text, people. Voice to text.
yeah. And I'm going to come back to comments in a minute. So if you got comments, throw them in here. I'm actually focused on getting the stage set. So I wrote back. I said, I'd love to pick your brain about this. Anyway, we could sit down and chat about it on my Beard Banter. In some ways, I get what you're saying, but I also have questions and thoughts that go against the statement. And like, if I was like totally reading into the moment, I actually didn't just have thoughts or questions. I had literally just gotten off a call 2 hours before and said both of those things. Like, I'll tell on myself. I was totally talking to this kid from my alma mater in the same high school. And he was like, I can't get a job in cyber. And I was like, okay, what have you done in your home lab? Have you built anything? Have you done anything in your world to find where your passion is? And I'd sprinkle in that. I think that's where you and I find some common ground. Right. Yeah. But I then said, hey, have you got any certs? Like, there's free certs out there, like CC. There's all kinds of stuff that you should be going down the path of. And I think one of the things we should unpack in here is a lot of people giving that advice are doing it because they're selling you something to buy from their course. Right. And so that was what I was trying to dodge for a sec, but we're going to get there. And then you gave a great response to a request that was done by, I think, Tim. Yeah, I don't remember which one it was, but it was one of the Tims, and said, well, first I'd work with them to identify what aspects of cybersecurity they're actually interested in. Like, you and I are 100p on that, because and the same thing with Leslie Carhart. She said, hey, if you're not focused on what you really want to do, like, and maybe I won't paraphrase her wrong, but many of them do not know without doing some deliberate discovery. Agreed. Then I would walk through with them how they can demonstrate the transferability of their existing skill sets, which is, what do you bring to the table, right? How are you employable? What's the value here? Then I'd talk with them about how to understand and assess what real needs are when they look at ridiculous job descriptions that seem to be searching for a magical unicorn, right? Like, I need somebody that's done Go for 12 years. You're like, bro, Go's been out for like 3 or 5 or something. So like, hold on, how are we there? Anyways, list goes on. So let's unpack some of that, right? Because I think your answer is so practical, which is find what you love. So how does somebody do that? What's the right answer? How do you give advice there for Alyssa?
Oh, there's lots of ways. I can't proclaim to have the right answer. I can claim to have a answer.
It's
right.
True.
And this is so that whole post honestly comes right from my book. Like, literally.
Okay. Slam dunk. And I saw someone quote that. No, I saw someone quote that. So I know that was correlative.
So it's, but it because I was in that same, first of all, it comes from having people countless times like reach out to me and say, can you help me get into cyber? Well, what about what part of cybersecurity are you trying to get
cyber's
into?
broad.
I just want to learn it all. Here? I'm like, you can't learn it all. There's nobody that knows it all. So, so as I started thinking about the book, I'm like, okay, how do I do this? So one of the exercises, this is actually,
go. Yeah, love it.
Is, go to, most of us who have some desire to be a part of cybersecurity probably read some cybersecurity news. Hopefully. So I said, go out, pick like 10, 15, maybe even 20, however headlines on cybersecurity articles that are particularly interesting to you. Right? Just take you don't have to read the article, just grab the headlines.
Okay.
Now sit down and with each one, what in that headline caught your interest? Like, just categorize it somehow, right? Like, was it because it was about, a breach and that was, really exciting or whatever? Was it, about, some new regulation that passed or, whatever it is, break that down and then just kind of look at, okay, what is the theme? Find the theme in those headlines of the things that are standing out to you the most in cybersecurity news.
Sure.
And that will immediately start you down a path of maybe I'm in, if it's a policy thing, maybe I'm more of like a GRC type person.
Sure. If it's all about the incident response, maybe I'm down an IR team play.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I could see that as a
stuff about new, threat intel. Maybe that's what, whatever.
Sure.
But it's a great way just to start to identify within yourself, where is my passion in cybersecurity?
Yeah.
Or conversely, and this, I don't go into this typically, but I'll say it because it's true. You may discover that really you're not that interested in cybersecurity. You might have just, but legitimately, there are people who really, this isn't the career path that they're going to enjoy, but they heard that it was a hot job market. So
no, you're accurate. So I had my Series 7 66 LHVA when I was like 19 years old. So I had my stockbroker's license. I worked for American Express Financial Advisors. And I did it because of a job board posting that said, make this much money in this time frame. Like, I was like, yeah, bro, commas. I like commas. I'm down with commas. Right. But I found it wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy it. I had no passion in it. I think to your point, you do have to figure out if you have a passion. And there's a reason. If you're in cybersecurity, in my opinion, you're going to get punched in the face. It unfortunately is kind of the nature, whether it comes from internal, whether it comes from a board that makes a decision that doesn't agree with what the risk profile should be, whether it be whatever it may be. You're not in a world where you get like all the attaboys you think you're going to get.
Right.
And so you have to, in my mind, be passionate about what you're doing and have a mission.
Think of what your attaboys are, by the way. It's like,
right.
Hey, nothing happened today. Great job.
Right. Winning. Hashtag the stuff works that's supposed to work. Right. Like,
everything worked. Nothing happened.
Yeah. And that becomes the expectation du jour. Right. And so, no, I think that's a great call out. So that's the first piece, is find a passion. In my advice, I've said, go get on like Try Hack Me. In fact, my wife is going through this right now. My wife, Kat. And she's looking at Try Hack Me and going, what do I like? And so she's going through a red team course. She's going through a, DFIR course. She's going through and just trying to see what she likes. Now, there's a challenge with that. And I've given some bad advice there, Alyssa, in my opinion, because there's these nomenclatural gaps and knowledge gaps that have to exist before that. So in your method, you're going, okay, what gets your passion? Like, what made you attracted to this? And then you go into it. And I think Leslie gave some really good advice on stage at Wild West Hackin' Fest, which I'll give a shout out to. I watched your presentation there. I watched her presentation there. They were both fantastic. And in hers, she said, go find people in that profession once you've found them. Like, if you find an Alyssa and you say, hey, I totally want to be a CISO, and ask her, what's the worst thing you deal with every day? Right. And that was part of her methodology was, and maybe there's some corollary in your book, but what's the next stage in your book of how you're approaching, now that I've found something I like in the headlines, what do I do next? What's the next step?
So now it's about identifying yourself. And first, I'm going to give you a gentle correction that Leslie's pronoun.
I love general corrections. Yeah. So they, them, thank you.
They, them, please.
Much better.
Just an important distinction.
Yeah, no, fair. Fair. Thank you.
But no, and the next step is really just, okay, so you've kind of gotten into that mode of, all right, this is sort of,
I like X, whatever X is.
Right. I'm kind of into this space. And then it's really about, okay, what skills do I have from other jobs?
Sure.
The jobs I've worked so far, the things I've done so far that might transfer to that.
Give me an example. Like, help me just something.
Perfect example, the one I throw out there all the time. Anyone who's heard me talk about this has heard this before. Take a barista from Starbucks.
Okay.
Let's say, hey, I'm a barista at Starbucks right now, or barista anywhere. But and I start going through this and I realize, wow, I'm really into like the like SOC analyst type of stuff, right? Like I like that, getting alerts and responding and doing the investigation side of it. So now take your role as a barista and take all the references out of that have anything to do with coffee, making coffee, whatever, right? Take all that out and describe it in the most general terms to the point that nobody could tell you what your job was from the way you described it. So in other words, what do? Well, they receive input from a number of different sources, right? They take that input and they analyze it and they break that input down into tasks.
Yeah, and then accurate tasks.
Accurate tasks. They have to then prioritize and execute those tasks with quality and with accuracy, and also prioritize them and execute them in a way that is most efficient
for delivering said products. Yeah, exactly.
And then deliver that quality. All the while, they also have to be thinking about potentially other maintenance tasks or things that they might need to do along the way.
Sure.
What I just described are skill sets I absolutely need in a SOC analyst. I need somebody who can be in that fast-paced environment, grabbing inputs from a lot of different places, breaking that down, identifying what the tasks are that are necessary, what priority and what order they should be executed in, and do it accurately, but also be mindful of recurrent maintenance type things that have to occur at the same time.
Yeah. And make sure people aren't missing this, right? What are those tasks in coffee just to make sure we're not missing it? I get an order for somebody that wants a half latte, half oat milk, single tall in a cup that doesn't burn my hand, but also something that is then shaken with two and four of the, like, you know what I mean? Like, and then I
Yeah.
also have to then think the equipment aspect is I need coffee beans, I need coffee, I need to run this through the espresso machine, I need to get milk started and steaming, I need to then also rinse that out and clean it so I have 5 more milk vessels. Like, you think about to those points, I think that is the aspect of you're talking about in my mind of how you get through the filters too, and making sure that those
Well, that's the
componentry,
next step,
right?
right?
Okay, I just jumped
Now
ahead.
you
I'm
'cause
reading
now
ahead in
you
Alyssa Miller's book of life. I love it.
what you know it what you've got now is you know what your core transferable skills are, right? They're the
Sure.
things that you
Yeah.
have. And there's in the book I walk through like skills versus knowledge
And we'll
versus
put a link for the
experience.
book in the
But
episode chat comments down below too for anybody watching
um
this. So
but aside from that, yeah, now it's like when you come to a job, now it's like, all right, I'm looking at this job description and I see all their different requirements, and some of them are going to be nuts. So, like you talked about the, 20 years of experience in Kubernetes.
right. Wait a minute. That's like a
That's not
12-year-old thing.
happening.
Like, can't even be that
No,
long. Like, what are we
no,
talking
I'm
about?
not there yet.
IA infrastructure as
Um,
code hadn't been around that long,
right? Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen.
So,
Yeah,
so you can kind of wipe those away. But how do
sure.
you connect those transferable skills to that, and then crafting your resume? And this is the thing where I cannot stress how important this is. Tailoring your resume for each job you apply to, right? Like I know there's this tendency to like spray and pray,
Yeah.
right? You just take your resume and fire it into 100 job
Yeah.
listings.
You're echoing exactly what Leslie says too. So you guys are
Yeah.
like peas in a pod.
Oh,
That
they and
yeah,
I are
yeah.
very close friends,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we are
yeah,
very
yeah.
closely aligned
Yeah,
on
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Not because even that like we planned that or worked together. It just happens that yeah, we both seem to
Sure.
agree very much so
It's
on this.
pragmatic in this
Yeah.
conversation,
It
right?
is, and it's a very analytical and logical way of stepping through it, right?
Makes sense.
You have to think about it. But yeah, I mean, the spray and pray method, I understand why people do it. I'm not judging anybody for doing it. But when people come to me for help and they say, yeah, I've sent in 150 resumes and I haven't heard anything. I said, well, if you sent in 150, how many times did you sit down and actually tailor the resume to the job off or to the job description?
Yeah, yeah.
Probably none, because if you sent it out that many times, you
Right.
know, and that's the thing. It's like, yeah, how do you even find 150 jobs that are all in the same field? So
Yeah.
that's probably
And
the
I
other
and
thing. You're probably applying to a lot of different types of jobs.
with the same exact catering, right? And the
Yeah.
same exact information. And
And
it
so,
doesn't show, I told you this before the show. I feel disingenuous sometimes giving any type of advice for careers in cyber because most of the roles I've found myself in, I've created or been a part of or kind of stumbled into in some ways, right? As being a cyber
yeah.
practitioner. And maybe that's everybody. But that said, for someone trying to get a role today and stepping into it, like this one kid that I talked to had come from a pretty prestigious high school. He came from a decent college. He came out with degrees. How does someone, because for me, I have hired before, Alyssa, I promise I'm going somewhere, but I have hired before when I was in head of pro services of our company. I think we were only about a 8 million or so dollar revenue MSP at the time, but we were hiring project service people. And I was, looking for it. And I always wanted to say, I don't care what's on paper. I don't care what's in the degree. I care about your passion. And I would look for someone that had a passion and a knowledge and an understanding that I could actually feel articulated in the subject matter, right? And if I said to them a V2V migration and they didn't understand it, I would probably be shocked if I was hiring a migration engineer, right? Like this would not work. And so I think, how do you get through the filters first, but then display the passion and show that you've done the work and research, to my point of why I believe in a home lab and why I believe in doing things. And sometimes not even home lab. You can do it almost for free now. You can go get a $10 a month Try Hackney subscription and build, do, and destroy all you need in that, at least in their catered ways. But yeah.
So let me ask you a question to answer
Let's
your
do it. I
question.
love that.
When you're talking to me right now, do you get the
Yes.
impression that this is a topic I'm pretty passionate about?
Yeah, like 4 billion on the 3
And
billion
why
meter.
why do you get that feeling?
Because you're knowledgeable, you're assertive on it, you show a command of the expertise, you have reasonable answers for how you would expect someone to go through it, you've thought through those things. Those would be the things that come to mind.
Do you notice none of the things you just said are things I did in the past? They're things that just happened in this conversation.
Yeah, it's true.
And this is the key.
Yeah.
This is what drives me nuts with the passion answer.
I love driving you
right?
nuts, by the way. So it's a
No, it's good,
personal
though.
passion
It's
of
good.
mine.
So, back at the beginning of the was that 2020? Yeah, it was 2020.
It just goes by
Because I
quick.
did these surveys as part of, I keep referencing
Yeah.
the book. This is kind of crazy. But I did surveys of people who are trying to get jobs and then hiring managers, right? Because it was all research for the book and other things. But, I did, one of the things I asked was, as a hiring manager, what's one piece of advice you'd give every candidate or any candidate?
Sure.
And then I word clouded that. Okay. I took
Okay.
all the answers, dumped them, and did a word cloud. Do you want to
What's
guess
our
what
big word in the center?
You want to guess what big word in the center was?
I don't know.
Passion.
I don't even have guess.
Passion.
Passion.
Everybody says passion, but how do you demonstrate passion? You can't demonstrate passion until you're sitting in front of that
That's
person
exactly it. How do you do that in a digital world?
Conversation.
100%.
And so that's where, to exactly your point, and this is what I love about what you just said, is it's not about the home lab until you're there and are talking about it with them, about what you did. So on the resume, you have to not be talking about the home lab. You can mention it, right? You can say I did this thing or whatever.
But it's not going to get you through the door.
I got to level whatever on TriHackMe or any of those other things.
Sure.
But to your point, you've got to get to the point that somebody sees your resume and brings you in, and then you can show your passion. So how do you get, step one is that ATS, that applicant tracking system. How do I game that system? And it's looking at keywords. It's understanding even something as simple as the format of your resume and how that impacts how it gets parsed. I mean, most of us who have applied to jobs have at some point had to stick our resume in there. It was supposedly going to parse it. And then you spend the next 30 minutes trying to fix everything that it effed up.
You mean AI is not going to take all of our jobs immediately? I didn't mean to
I haven't played with one since LLMs have become like this big.
I bet it gets better.
Bet that LLMs are probably getting built into all those and probably doing a lot better job.
I would hope. Yeah.
But you're trying to, someone used to suggest, put a bunch of white text at the bottom of your white document that just has all the keywords from the job description.
Oh my goodness gracious.
No, doesn't work. And in fact, it actually gets you kicked out.
Yeah.
But as you're describing things in your history, in your skill set, in your knowledge base, in your experience, if you can tie that word in, use their word instead of a word you might have used, or talk about something you did in a different way that speaks to the language that they used in the job description, that's how you start to speak to. And
it's your Starbucks example, right? Is my point. It really is that instead of writing, I worked at Starbucks, it is expansion upon the things you spoke about, right? That need to meet those aspects, right? To that point. And that's just,
how many of you have seen that resume, right? You've got, hey, I worked here from this date to this date. This was my title. But then under it, you've got your bullets that say what you did.
Yeah.
That's the key, right?
Yeah.
And
100%.
What especially people coming out of college a lot of times don't understand, if you've not been through these processes before, maybe even if you've never been a hiring manager before, you might not realize this. The first thing that applicant tracking system does is score you.
Right.
You get a score. And literally, like when I'm sitting here, I can go into Workday and it's got all of the applicants listed out with a relative score. And what happens in most organizations is anything below, say if it's like a 0 to 100 score, which they aren't all like that, but let's just say anything below an 80, we just filter that out. And we don't show it to the hiring manager.
They just get the email. It just comes straight back and thank you for your interest. Yeah.
Sometimes, it might be like below 50%, just reject outright. Or the other thing too, is sometimes there's questions. There'll be some questions that if you answer it incorrectly, will kick you out immediately. I actually have someone I hired who initially got kicked out because she accidentally answered yes to requiring H-1B visa sponsorship.
I see.
Which my company is not able to do.
Yeah.
So it immediately just kicked her out.
Yeah.
So you do have to be very careful about those things too. A lot of times, if you get an immediate kick out where it rejects you, there very well might be something that you did in
Check
there.
that was not
It can
okay
be
for them.
it can
Yeah,
be
yeah.
that your salary request, if they asked for that, was higher than their range, in which case that's not
Oh,
a job you want anyway.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
It might be that you ticked a box wrong. It could be any number of those
Could
very
be the beard.
tactical things. I haven't seen one ask if you have a beard, but maybe.
Okay, I just
I
checked. I
mean,
was checking for me and Chris
airline
Roberts.
pilots, they
Yeah, yeah,
do,
yeah.
right? Airline
Yeah,
pilots,
yeah.
you have to shave
Yeah.
it, but that's a whole different industry. So
Yeah, it's not okay. It's not happening. I've already done it once. I did it for charity. It'll never happen again. I want to tackle a couple things because Zach popped in. Zach, great. Thanks. Good to see you. Thanks for commenting. And he asked about networking, right? And so,
mhm.
let's maybe get your take on this. And one of the things that I've even said before, so I'll tell on Matt's self, it does help to get out there and get known. It does help to go out and build, talk about the things you're passionate about. If you're doing
Well,
research on something, write about it, talk about it, go speak about it, be that person. Does that help? Does that work? And is that reasonable to give as advice, or is that unreasonable? Let's explore it.
it's absolutely reasonable. It's not a guarantee. I can tell you from my personal experience, it has gotten me multiple jobs. In fact,
Me too. Yeah,
my
me
last
too.
3 jobs have all been the result of, networking and people I knew who reached out to me and said either, "Hey, I have this job," or, "Hey, I know somebody who's hiring for this thing I think you would be really good for."
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
so that does happen. But even if it's not that tactical, like even if they don't come to you with like a, "Hey, I'm going to connect you with this person who
Sure. Here's a
hiring
job
you."
on a silver platter. They want you. You're the one.
Right. I mean,
Right.
that
Yeah.
can happen. But
Yeah.
also, what does happen is as you're networking, you're starting to meet other people. You're hearing different perspectives. When you post things online, here's why I post hot takes, because people like you respond. And then I'm sitting here having a
And
conversation
it's a
about
great
it.
one. Yeah.
I'm learning
Yeah.
from you
Yeah.
as we're
I'm learning from
talking.
you. Yep.
It's
Exactly.
shaping my view of things. We've got
Okay.
Zach here in the chat talking about things, and
Yep.
I'm learning from all of that, right? So
Yeah.
that's part of what networking does for you is as you're doing that, you're not just, yeah, you definitely you make connections, people might help you find a job,
Sure.
but you're also learning and growing and you're hearing how people talk about things, which might also make you a little bit stronger in the interview process itself because
Now
now
that
you're hearing how people talk about it. You know,
that's a hot
when,
take. That right there
when
is an Alyssa Miller hot take right
I'm
there.
telling you, and it's all throughout your career, right? Like
Yeah.
seriously, right now for me, CISO, right? I'm still learning now. As good as I feel I am at this, in fact, I'm training people on how to do it.
Sure.
Speaking to the board and speaking in their language, you have to develop that. And how do I learn that? By
Failure
networking with people who are
and
on
talking to
board,
people. Yeah, yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And that
Yeah.
means not just security people, right? Because most board members are not former CISOs or current CISOs. Most
It's a true
board members
story.
are CFOs, CEOs, whatever. They ran some awesome nonprofit, whatever they did.
Hey, maybe
You
in
know,
one sweet paradise down the road, Alyssa, we'll have a seat and we'll be there making those decisions and making the horrible Sophie's choices in the same way they have to. But yes, maybe I don't wish that on us. Maybe we stay where we're at. I don't know. I don't know what to
I
say.
don't know,
I
but
digress.
yeah,
But no, that's
I mean
it.
that's the
Yeah.
thing, right? You're always learning, and that so as you're in even the interviews, now how people talk about different things. You know what the
Yeah.
hot topics are, so you can kind of
Yeah. You know
understand
what
what
they
to
asked for
expect.
as a role. They know how yours relate to that ask,
Yeah,
right? You get to that stage.
exactly. You're
Yeah.
constantly learning that way.
And I think you're right. I mean, I always say this as a technician, as an engineer, because my background does come from that side of the world. If I ever looked back at my work and said I did a great job, I ran out of growth. I suck. Like I want to know that I can get better in life and that I can grow. right?
Yeah.
And I think to your point, networking has done so much of that for me. So Zach, in my mind, I think you're right. I want to tackle a couple others. Eddie Phillips popped in. Eddie, love you, buddy. It's awesome to see you. I hope things are great and you're traversing around somewhere in Europe or something, doing amazing things as usual. It's great to see you, buddy. It happens, LOL. And then Zach said also, it'll take time to build your network. You know why? Because it takes time to build relationships. It takes time to show interest. It takes time to be known. It takes time to get and know people. But I've also known Alyssa, and you're another example of this, and they with Leslie are also a great example of this. But every time I've reached out to someone in this world, they've said yes. I sat down in Chris Roberts' basement just by reaching out and saying, "Hey, I'm a budding cybersecurity idiot in the SMB space. Can I come talk to you?" And we sit down in this giant Scottish armchair and drink some whiskey together. Like, it was welcoming and encouraging if you're willing to say, "I want to learn."
I'm really having trouble that I'm loving this. You and Chris Roberts, who honestly look the same.
No, it was like doppelgangers. Yeah, it was great.
Can you just like dye yours blue? And
just right here, just a little blue there, and then gain like 1,000 in the hacking skills department would like help me out in that regard. But
see, now that's imposter syndrome talking.
maybe, but I live it. I suppose we all do.
Yeah,
but no, to the point I was making is I count it as we are so willing to help others, almost to a fault in this industry. If you're willing to be humble and ask for that help and build a network, and if you have genuine ideas and they're willing to change or they bring something they're listened to, right? You speak of imposter syndrome. I joined a zero trust working group with like Dr. Ron Martin and Alex Sharp and like all these people that are like in this and talking about it, Kindervag, and just like all these people that are just so big. And I'm like, yeah, I'm the SMB representative. You know what I mean? But like, I felt like such a baby in there, but I had things I could add, perspectives people hadn't thought about. And that's life, right? Is that introduction.
Here's a key thing for everyone out there to think about when it comes to this imposter syndrome thing, right? Now, it's, first of all, understand what you said before is so important. Everybody has more to learn. I've said it a million times in a million different contexts. The day that I feel like I have completely mastered something is the day I need to stop doing it.
And I've done that in my career. I've changed careers, and like I've done all that mortgage can be for me now.
If you feel that way, then
100%.
You've stopped attempting to learn, because you always have more, and you can always learn from anybody, whether they're brand new to the industry or they've been in it for 30 years. Okay. Sure. Both of them have something to teach you. And that's an important thing. So understand that first. But when it comes to your imposter syndrome, a lot of the fear that people have, I think, and at least this was for me, so I'm kind of projecting, the fear of asking for help is the fear of being looked down upon or treated like crap because you asked. And there are definitely, let's be honest, there are people in this industry who will pull that crap.
Yeah,
who will be jerks.
Yeah,
but those aren't the people that you want help from anyway. They're not the people that you want, and they're not the people who matter. I will say that. Like someone who has that response to you asking for help is someone who thinks their shit don't stink and that they know everything.
Yeah.
And where that all comes from actually is their own insecurity that they feel, and they're dealing with their own imposter syndrome, but they deal with it by trying to push other people down to prop themselves up.
Yeah. Not okay.
So understand that. And that, those people will respond. There's a pretty infamous one out there right now that the information security industry as a whole is kind of shunned and trying to get rid of, who shall remain nameless.
Yeah. But we don't give any power to it. Yeah, for sure.
But understand, those personalities are out there, and sometimes they're loud, but they are in the minority. Because as you said, the majority of people in cybersecurity, we all got here the same way. We had
stumbled into
curiosity. Well, not all of us stumbled. I mean, some people got here, very, very intentionally. But
you took apart Fisher Price stuff. Was your story?
I took apart my parents' VCR.
That's right. Yeah.
They weren't real happy about that either. But
I imagine not. Mine either.
That's
Mine
all I
first
will
started
say.
with an air rifle I couldn't get back together, right? Like it was never able to be pushed back. It never came back together.
See,
Like
I
I
put the
failed.
VCR back together and it worked. Now they
Winning.
freaked
There
out
you
because
go.
there were like 2 screws left over.
And it rattled a little when you had some movement in there, just a smidge, a little bit. Who needs them? They were extra parts. These were superfluous parts.
We
I
didn't
didn't
need
need
these
these.
extra screws.
Yeah.
Fine.
But I think that brings us back to, the advice for people getting in this world and getting into the big thing that is cyber. And maybe I have an interesting take on this too, in that a lot of what is cyber exists because what should be security doesn't. And what I mean by that is the less and less endemic things are built into a system, the more they're listed as something separate. And as you start seeing cyber being how I configure something, how I set up these settings, how I actually defend my posture, what I choose as an attack. So there's so many things that go into that are really more business things that we've chosen to make cyber things. And I don't know. I see the world converging more over time and how we define that. But I get the luxury of being a theorist, and I can also be wrong. So,
Well, I mean,
anyways.
you're not wrong though. I mean, what do we always? I know we've been pushing for this for like 20 years, right? At least the 20 years I've been in security, probably longer. But we always talk about push left, right?
Sure. Move it earlier in the life cycle. Move it left in the development of this product. Yeah.
What is that really saying? It's saying exactly what you were just saying, that security shouldn't be this separate bolt-on thing.
Yeah.
Security is just part and parcel to making sure that our internet of trash toothbrushes don't get used in a DDoS attack.
I love you.
How is that the headline this morning, by the way?
Internet of trash. Yeah. What was that? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Internet of IoT toothbrushes were being used in a DDoS attack today.
No.
Or overnight.
That's so delicious.
Like, I mean,
does the DDoS drop when I power it up because of the amperage drop, or does it still have the same throughput at the chip level?
I have no idea.
I
saw the headlines. I haven't even read into it far enough
God.
to find out exactly what the hell is going on. But I'm like, it's one of those where you see the headline and your head immediately hits the desk. It's like an involuntary reaction.
Yeah.
Like,
it's
gotta
just,
be kidding me.
It's too tasty. I mean, it's mint flavored, but it's just too tasty. Sorry, I couldn't help it. But yeah, no, that blows my mind. You're right. Like, and that's the world we live in, right? We you look at National Cyber Defense Strategy that's calling out, control or 3.3 says, or 3.4, talk about IoT and secure IoT. We've literally built connected attack devices that we haven't secured, that are admin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that have no governance or oversight, that are living in our world.
And you know what? We're doing it again. This is a repeat pattern, and it has been for as long as I can remember. Like, for the last 10 years now, right? IoT has been the thing. And we don't even call it IoT anymore.
No, it's just my toaster. It's just smart toaster. Yeah, it's my smart toaster. Yeah.
So connect everything to the internet because it's cool, it's fashionable, it's fatty, right? Like, there's
100%.
no reason to connect your toothbrush to the internet, but we do it anyway because, well, then we can say it's a smart.
Now I know that I brushed for 1 minute 43 seconds, not 2 minutes, at adequate pressure, at the right cycles per second, with the right amount of acceleration. Yeah, I'm with you.
But we're doing it again.
Yeah.
So we did that because, it wasn't like we were looking for wasn't like we had a use case that we could solve the problem by connecting it to the internet.
Right.
We went out looking for how can we, what use case can we find to make sure that we connect this thing to the internet? Because we have to connect everything to the internet. We're doing the same thing now with generative AI. You talk to 90% of the companies out there that are looking at using generative AI right now. Same thing. It's not about, hey, we have this use case or this problem case that we think we can solve with generative AI.
We better be using this or we're behind.
We got to find use cases for how we put this into our product because everybody's doing it. We have to too.
Yeah, true story. Gosh, dang it. We could do this for like 12 hours probably on this conversation.
Oh my God.
Like this is the goosebumpies type combo for sure.
How I'm getting excited.
Well, and I talk about this like, pardon me, but I talk about this as I talk on stage a lot, showing this corollary. We invented the car in 1897, right? The internal combustion engine based car. Benz invented it in Germany. And yet we didn't invent a seatbelt until 1950. In fact, some woman in California had to paint lines in the middle of the road because cars were hitting each other, and they offered to put her in jail or sue her until they realized, oh my God, cars not hit each other as much, these lines might be a good egg, right? Like genuinely, that's how they had to get to that path. Maybe hyperbolistically delivered, but ultimately that then becomes the line system and how we separate roads and all of these things that go down that path. And yet we didn't invent a national traffic safety regulation until 1966 after Ralph Nader's unsafe at any speed. That's 81 years of having something, growing it ubiquitously. We changed where people live. Like cities used to be born, live, and die within a mile of where you were gonna exist, and now you can live in a suburb and drive to another city. Like that changed overnight, and we adopted it because we know we die. And so as humans, we adopt technology. We're there with technology now in IT. It was born in 1937 with the first digital computer. And it's now at a stage of, since 81, being on the internet. And we're hooking up our stupid toothbrush so it can attack freaking companies somewhere with my Sonic care. Like now I'm Sonic DDoS is what it's going to be classified, right? Like, oh, goodness gracious. Anyways, but we're at that stage where you and I finally get a voice. I think we're at this stage where the things we've been screaming and you've been screaming out there for a long time are finally getting listened to. I feel like maybe as we get DDoS,
for better or worse. Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. I mentioned before that like I do training related to boards, and I've been training board directors on how to talk to their CISOs, and I've been training CISOs how to talk to directors.
Seems self-indulgent to talk to both because it lets you set the language, which I love.
But I'm both.
But I digress. So, you are both. I know.
I mean, I serve on a board. I'm also, a CISO. So I've been able to
see a pretty rocking human in general. So just leaving it at that stage.
but so here's where I was going with that is, the reason I do that, at least with the CISOs, is because we squawked and screamed, rightfully so, that we didn't have a seat at the table.
Sure.
Well, then we started to get the seat at the table. We weren't ready.
Yeah, like, true story.
I've seen so many. I hate this. I mean, I used to be in consulting. I watched so many bad board presentations where, the best case scenario ones were when all the board members put their faces down to their, they're looking at their mobile devices, not paying attention. The worst ones were when you watched that poor CISO just get shredded. Right?
And I think you talked of one where that was you, actually, in an earlier talk, if I remember.
So And I mean, it was the very first time I ever was in front of a board.
Yeah, you learned.
And I went in there. The CISO had a great idea of how he wanted this presented, so I kind of went with it. I didn't think any better of it. Personally, I didn't know any better either. So I did it, and it did not go well.
Sure. So didn't mean to derail, but
I've learned, and I've had very, very incredible experiences with boards more recently. Yeah. And so, but that's the thing is, as we get these opportunities, we need to understand what we're actually walking into,
what we're asking for. Like what are we actually asking for when we ask for a seat at the table? Does that mean you're just going to come in and say we're doing this, or do you still have to play the politics and understanding of the choices being made at that seat, right?
Well,
like in that regard.
I mean, let me put it this way. Someone asked me, actually, I've had numerous people ask along the way, hey, I want to be in an executive role someday too. What would you suggest where should I start? Like, what's the first thing I should do? You know what I tell them? Go buy the book, 10-Day MBA.
Okay.
It is not a cybersecurity book.
Yeah. It's about business conversations.
A book that gives you insight into what you would learn if you actually went to get your MBA without having to go through, a multi-year MBA program.
Sure. But it's the concepts being made decisions upon that all of those people in that room have been through.
It gives you empathy to understand what all those strange people are actually thinking about, instead of just rejecting them as, well, they made a business decision instead of a security decision. Well, of course they did. That's their job.
Yeah. We're going to maybe end on this because it's so quick how this goes by. But I have used your quote on stage. Now, I always let people know I suck and I might be misattributing and misquoting a bit. But one of the things that you said that resonated with me, and this was from 2021 at Wild West Hackin' Fest when you spoke. And you said, we're told our whole lives as CISOs that the language of business is risk. And then you paused for emphasis and said, that's horseshit. The language of business is profit, unadulterated fucking profit. And I've used that exact terminology. I don't know if it's exactly accurate, but I think I captured the moment
It
of
captures the point.
they take all of the risk on when they started in business. And from that point forward, we're simply trying to explain to them how they have this risk. They took it on. We have to guide those decisions and help them make
They
right.
already
Like exactly.
accepted the risk.
Yeah,
So if
yeah,
you're
yeah.
reducing the risk and that's the value you bring, you're not
Yeah,
very
yeah. Right.
exciting.
Exactly
Because they
it. You
already
didn't help
accepted that
anything.
risk. They're in
Yeah.
business now. Like,
Right.
give them
I love
something
it.
more, please.
I love
Yes.
it. So okay to continue using it in its format that I
Please
remember it in my
do.
heart? Okay.
Yes, please,
Yeah,
God,
yeah,
get that
yeah.
out there so people
Yeah.
start understanding.
And I
Like,
use famous CISO, and it's only because I gave that ascription. So I'm going to let it stand because it's my ascription,
okay,
comma space, Alyssa Miller, famous CISO. So
oh
we'll we'll
God.
we'll end on that horrible thing for you. And I want to say thank you so much, Alyssa. This is a blast. And I think the distillation of this TLDR is you want to make sure that if you're giving advice, that you actually are thinking about the holistic picture, not simply go like cyber and you'll be fine. No, that's not how this works. There's other components to this that matter. So thank you so much. Anything you want to say to close? If not, we'll wrap it
No,
up.
just thank you for having me on. It has been a blast, obviously. I've been all over the place here.
It's
So
good. It's the
I
best. That's the
appreciate it.